There are moments in life when we ask ourselves why we insist on repeating behaviors we already know will harm us. Why do we feel drawn to what dissolves our peace? And why does silence, when it finally settles, sound so uncomfortable, almost as if it were trying to reveal truths we've spent a lifetime avoiding? Nietzsche said that the human being is a bridge stretched between instinct and something greater than oneself. Perhaps addiction is exactly that, an unstable crossing between raw impulse and the longing for meaning. Carl Jung did not view dependence as a moral flaw. For him, it was a kind of inner call, a muffled plea rising from a part of the psyche that has been ignored for far too long. And maybe that is why you are here now, in this precise moment when the house rests, yet you remain awake, accompanied only by the thoughts you avoided throughout the day. Compulsion never presents itself as a threat. It arrives softly, dressed in comfort, promising quick relief. It appears in the cigarette you light without noticing, in the automatic gesture that slides across your phone screen, in the drink poured almost by reflex. What almost no one realizes is that every impulse has an origin. Behind desire, there is almost always a pain you tried to bury as deep as possible. And that pain, no matter how much you reject it, only wants to be heard. This reflection is not meant to be a mirror that shows only what your eyes already know. It wants to reveal what hides behind them. If you stay until the end, you will understand that you never failed because you were weak. And perhaps you will finally see that fighting in the same way is no longer necessary. This is not about willpower. It is about presence. It is about stopping the constant escape from what Jung called the shadow, that dark part that stores everything you tried to forget. The simple fact that you are reading these words already shows that the first step has been taken. Only those who truly wish to understand can hear what the unconscious is trying to say. Addiction seems gentle. It doesn't demand, it doesn't threaten. It merely whispers, "You have faced enough today. Allow yourself a bit of rest." And so, like someone reaching for a blanket on a cold night, you give in. The smoke, the drink, the food, the screen, each offers a brief sense of ease. Yet behind that fleeting relief, something much deeper is unfolding. Jung believed that compulsion acted as a symbol, a code the unconscious uses when it has no other means of expression. Think sincerely. If your inner world were in full harmony, if there were no hidden pain, why would there be a need for numbness? Addiction is not the root of the problem. It is simply the reflection of a void that has not yet been named. What is most unsettling is not the desire itself. It is the silence that arrives before it, carrying everything you refuse to face. Epictetus once said that no one is free unless he rules over himself. Jung, however, went even further. It is not enough to control one's behavior. One must discover what is ruling from within. But our culture treats addiction as laziness, lack of discipline, or a moral failing. And how can you control something you don't understand? How do you defeat an adversary who wears your own face as a mask? Imagine addiction as a masked character. Outwardly, it appears as cigarettes, alcohol, food, digital distractions. But inside, what truly acts is what consumes you. Unmet emotional needs, wounds still pulsing, parts of yourself that felt abandoned. The more you try to eliminate it by force, the stronger it becomes, feeding precisely on your resistance. Jung said that everything we resist persists. That is perhaps why patterns repeat. The ritual is always the same. There is a particular time, a familiar place, a sequence almost choreographed. It is like a play in which the purpose is not pleasure, but the temporary erasure of the self. And with time, this escape becomes a prison. That is why so many feel small, defeated, ashamed. The truth, however, is that your enemy is not a lack of strength. It is your pain, and pain is not overcome through brutality. It is crossed with awareness. Before fighting compulsion, one must understand it. Before resisting, one must listen. Up close, addiction ceases to be a monster and becomes a messenger. There's something almost ancestral in this silent pain, as if it were an old call forgotten. What truly matters is not the substance, the gesture, or the behavior. What matters is what these things replace. The shadow, just as Jung described, holds everything repressed, rejected, buried. It is the shadow that appears when the glow of a screen reveals loneliness, when a drink warms the absence of an embrace, when food briefly fills an ancient emotional void. The need is not irrational. It is trying to balance something you have not yet understood. It might be the child within who received too little affection. It might be the exhausted adult who believes they are never enough. It might be a loss never mourned or a solitude so old it has become part of the body. Next time the impulse appears, ask yourself, what kind of hunger is this? What am I trying to fill? Which part of me is calling for help? The answer is never in the object of addiction, but in the emotion it tries to silence. When you observe it with compassion, something inside begins to reorganize. A pause emerges, and in that pause, a new path can begin. Jung said that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Addiction, in this sense, is the most unpolished, yet effective, way of forcing us to look at what we avoid. Every impulse tries to say, there is something important here, and every resistance only amplifies that message. Compulsion is not your enemy. It is the wounded part of you trying to be seen. Perhaps that is why so many attempts to stop have failed, because you tried to kill the messenger instead of understanding the message. Every addiction is, deep down, a distorted plea for affection, a desperate attempt to feel something, even if only for a moment. When you listen to this part with kindness, a new movement begins. A small internal opening appears, and from it, transformation starts to bloom. Compulsion rarely announces its arrival. It approaches quietly, with familiar footsteps. It behaves like an old visitor who learned how to enter without knocking. It watches you tire, waits for the exact moment, and when your vulnerability peaks, it whispers, just this once. And you give in not because you are weak, but because you are exhausted. For Jung, compulsive behavior was a symbolic act. Repeating a habit unconsciously was an attempt to restore an internal emotional order that had been lost. It is like an ancient survival ritual that, instead of offering transcendence, provides only a brief relief followed by emptiness. You may not realize it, but this ritual contains hidden wisdom. Behind every repetition is an emotional message waiting to be understood. Destroying the behavior without interpreting it is like smashing a fire alarm because the noise bothers you, without noticing that it was warning of a blaze inside your soul. Jung's invitation is profound. Observe the ritual with clarity. Watch the impulse, as if watching a play unfold within your inner world. Between desire and action lies a space. That space is freedom. You do not need to erase the ritual. You can transform it. If the urge to escape appears every night, ask, what hurts in this moment? What loneliness is revealing itself? What within me is asking for care? The truth is that we do not become addicted to pleasure itself. We become addicted to escaping pain. And in recognizing this, awakening begins. Jung called this process individuation, becoming whole. The journey is not made by avoiding the shadow, but by entering into dialogue with it. The impulse stops being a threat and transforms into a portal. A simple gesture, breathing deeply, writing a sentence, resting your body for a few minutes, has the power to dismantle old patterns and initiate new ones. It is not about eliminating desire. It is about consciously choosing what to do with the energy behind it. Each small conscious choice dissolves invisible chains and restores autonomy. With time, you realize something extraordinary. What once brought you down becomes a sign of strength. Desire stops being an enemy and becomes a mirror. Jung did not advocate repression. He advocated transmutation, the symbolic legacy of ancient alchemy. Just as metals were purified by fire, He believed that pain could become wisdom when crossed with awareness. When the impulse arises, do not flee, and do not fight in the old way. Stay, feel, ask, transform. The raw energy of desire can be redirected toward rebuilding, not destroying. This is the moment when you shift from prisoner to creator of your own destiny. And if you have come this far, something in you has already begun to change. You have faced thoughts that many avoid for an entire lifetime. That is not small, it is immense. Now you know that true strength is not in repression, but in integration. Every discomfort will become a guide. Every impulse will become an invitation. Every conscious choice will be a step toward your freedom. The question is no longer how do I stop, but what within me needs to be finally heard. Answering this honestly is worth more than any method of abstinence. This is how real healing begins, not by fighting against yourself, but by recovering the parts of you that were left behind.